Tecovas is the go-to for premium, handcrafted Western boots. Stop by any store location for a warm welcome, a cold drink in hand, and a truly one-of-a-kind shopping experience. Let our friendly staff help you find your new go-to boots, whether your first pair or your 50th. Finish things off with a complimentary boot brand to make them extra special. Come for the boots, stay for the good times. Tecovas, forever West.
Welcome to the How of Business with your host, Henry Lopez, the podcast that helps you start, run, and grow your small business. And now, here is your host.
Welcome to the How of Business podcast. This is Henry Lopez. And welcome back to this special roundtable series about business ownership. On part one, which I previously released, we talk about how to find the right business. And now in this part two, we shift our focus to one of the biggest challenges business owners face after you get started, which is to how to actually grow your business. And we'll focus in on a few specific areas related to that. Joining me again on this conversation are Giuseppe Grammatico, the franchise guide, Rocky Lalvani of the Profit Answer Man podcast, and David Barnett, a small business and acquisition expert and author. And in this episode, again, we discuss what it really takes to grow a healthy business, including cash flow systems, leadership, scaling challenges, and the mindset shifts that are required as your business grows.
Thanks for joining us today. We're going to kick it off today with phase number 2 of the entrepreneurial journey. We talked about finding a business on the last episode, and today we're going to talk about cash flow management, coaching, and strategy. So talk about profit first and cash flow management. I think that's a super important topic.
Profit First is a book by Mike Michalowicz, and he's a serial entrepreneur. He wrote the book because he essentially went bankrupt. Even after having multiple seven-figure businesses, right? That is not outside the ordinary. It is really nothing more than a cash flow management system. So when you bought the business, you said you were going to make money. Well, great. Show me the money, right? That's the line. And so what Profit First does is whenever you get money, it goes into the income account. So that's all the money coming in. So if you remember last episode, we said, hey, show us that the revenue is real. It's the same concept. Here is the real revenue. Every day, month, whatever, the money comes in this bank account. And then once you get the money on a regular basis, you send it to do what you said you were going to do. So first off, you're supposed to be profitable. So we set aside our profit first. Kind of like pay yourself first, kind of like the 401k maybe that you had at work. The money comes off the top. This is my profit. It goes in the profit account. Just because it goes in the account doesn't mean you do anything. It just sits there. The next account is to make sure you, the owner, gets paid because that's what you all wanted. I wanted to get paid. So let's put your pay in the owner's pay account. Of course, the government's going to come for its taxes. So let's be prepared for that. Let's put our taxes aside. And then the last thing is, hey, this is the money that I have left. And I got to figure out how to run my business on what's left, my operating account. And the thing that happens a lot of times is they do this, and then after a month or two, they're like, I'm out of money in my operating account. So they start stealing from their other accounts. At least you now know that there's a problem months ahead of running out of cash, because at least you have some of those reserves there. And it tells you that something is wrong in the business, something is wrong with your model. Go figure out what the problem is. And that's the downfall of Profit First. It doesn't tell you what the problem is. It just sets off the alarm bell that you ran out of money to run your business. Figure out why.
But Rocky, people that are trying to manage their business by looking at their bank account alone usually find out 45 days after, the alarm bell should have gone off that they have a problem. And so just having an alarm bell go off is a huge advantage in running a business.
Most business owners aren't looking at their financials. They're looking at their bank balance. And so you're getting an early warning that you spent your pay, you spent your profit, and you spent the tax money.
Yeah, this is such great stuff. This is a leading indicator, an early warning type approach, right, which business owners usually don't have. Even when we look at our P&L, it's a lagging indicator. So that's what I love about it. But I'm glad you spoke to the key thing, though, that I see, Rocky, that people struggle with Profit First. People think that, this is how I'm going to make money, even if the the business model is broken, that there won't be enough to leave in the profit. But to your point, if you use it, at least it'll tell you there's a problem, something's broken in the business model. So I love that part of it.
Well, in Profit First, Rocky, you talk about the vanity metrics versus, earnings, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the traps that I see business owners fall into is they get an opportunity to make a sale. It's maybe a high dollar value. They're excited about being able to, receive that check one day, but maybe they're not making the margin on it that they should, right? And so the Profit First idea, do you find that it causes people to pause and really examine these transactions more carefully to make sure it makes sense for them? Or is the discipline learned afterwards as the accounts shuffle out?
It depends, right? Some people, they just steal and they go, this system is broken. It doesn't work for my business. And we're like, no, your business doesn't work. It just told you that, right? That's just the reality of it.
Now, at McDonald's, wake up to a $4 breakfast meal deal. Wake up to a sausage McMuffin or a sausage biscuit, to hash browns, and wake up to a hot coffee. Get your $4 breakfast meal deal.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
I think that's the hard transition. I think that the real struggle is most business owners, they know how to do their business. At least over time, they figure out how to do their business. If you're in the restaurant business, you know how to cook. Maybe, in the trades, you know how to put the roof on. Most business owners don't understand how to do the finance part. They don't know how to wear the finance hat. And I think the problem is they ask all the wrong people. The bookkeeper is like, yeah, I put this in the block where I'm supposed to put it. I did that. They're not telling you how to grow the business. Yeah. Your CPA is a tax person. They're like, yeah, I followed all the IRS codes you made, or you didn't make money and you owe taxes. How do I grow my business? Spend less. That's everyone's answer, spend less. And that's not maybe it is the answer, but it's not really the answer. It could be pricing. It could be how the cash comes in. Like, David, you talked about, I made the sale. Did you get the check? We don't celebrate till we get the cash, right? How quickly is that coming in? So it's all of these other things that are part of the business and understanding how the cash flows that I think are more important.
Great point. Here's a question I want to throw out for a quick conversation that I think fits best here, Giuseppe, in the agenda. And that's the mindset around debt. So we touched a little bit already about that some people come to business ownership with really bad personal financial habits. They're overspending. And then I find that translates into the way they're going to financially manage the business. But then I have a lot of clients that are on the other side of that. They've been brought up, understandably, to think that in personal life, debt, especially consumer debt, is bad. But then they fail to understand the value of leverage at the right level. David talks a lot about this as it relates to the debt you're going to incur to buy a business. But I would love to get three of you, but maybe we can start with Rocky. How you help people make that shift on mindset that there is such a thing as good debt in business?
I think you have to define what the debt is being used for. Especially during COVID, the government was handing out lots of money, and people were using debt for daily operations, right? They were paying their employees. Or what happens, though, is if a business owner is struggling, they've got a cash flow problem, they go borrow money, and then they use it for daily operations, not to improve their business, not to make more profit, not to fund a particular deal. What I mean by that is, let's say you've got a situation which is a longer term type of sale delivery. So they give you the order today, you have to buy all the materials, you have to deliver it, and then they pay you 30, 60, 90 days later. Funding that is okay. Of course, you should also include the cost of funding in your proposal. You don't put that as a line item, but you make sure there's enough profit to cover it. And that is workable. I'm doing this to get this deal to make this money versus just spending money and hoping that somehow it's going to come back to you.
So borrowing for growth or investment, avoid borrowing to cover for a broken business model.
Correct.
Henry, I have seen so many people get a line of credit from their bank, and they say, this is great, I can finance receivables, I can finance inventory, but what really starts to happen is they'll lose money one month. And instead of that alarm bell going off that Rocky mentioned earlier and them saying, well, how do I fix my business? Well, they don't need to, because they've been able to finance the loss with the line of credit. And then they can drag their heels a bit. There's a story I love to tell about a client that I worked with several years ago. These were some guys doing like those nice epoxy flooring, epoxy floor finishing that we see in garages and factories and places with concrete floors. And they wanted to buy this expensive machine that would like grind the floor material, like grind the concrete or whatever. And I told them not to. I said, you can rent that thing. You should rent that thing. And when you develop enough pipeline of business that you are busy 15, 16 days a month and you need that machine, then the economics will change. They came to me a few months afterwards and they say, we are now spending like $1,500 a month on renting this machine, but if we bought it and paid a loan, we'd be paying half that amount. Well, that's the time to do it. That's the time. And so if you treat it in that way, you're always winning.
All right, so let's talk about a second topic. This is a topic I talk a lot about. And it's about, the business is up and running, and it's along the lines of strategic connections and relationship building. A lot of people I work with said I am not a salesperson, and I always say, as a business owner, technically you are. You're always selling the business, and there's different layers here and different levels is the way I explain it. We're not cold calling necessarily, but it's relationship building, and the place that I recommend to everyone joining the Chamber of Commerce, that being kind of the place where you're in the same neighborhood, you're speaking with other small business owners in your market, depending on what your business is, and just building that network. I jokingly call it the mayor of the town. So the importance of relationship building is big. It's how we all met, either through podcasts and through introductions over the years. So we'll go with Henry if you wanna take over. But the importance of relationship building. What do you recommend to individuals as far as where to start?
Right. And I'll come from the perspective of a location-specific business, not an online business, right? So right. The typical business, either in the services or retail, whether you have brick and mortar or not, where you're depending on those people that live in that geographic area to consume your product or service. First and foremost, I would say, and I'm advising this, like, for example, I'm working with my daughter now and building her business. And I suffer from this as well, but younger people in particular, I'm generalizing. The key thing I always tell them, and this isn't my adage, but the business is out there, not in here. In other words, we got to get out there, to your point, Giuseppe, into the community and connect with people. Now, what's most effective? Certainly, Chamber of Commerces are still effective, but I see them as dying because their original purpose is all of that I can get myself online now. So often, it depends on the Chamber of Commerce, and I've been a member of lots of them. Sometimes it's, the 5 realtors and the 6 life insurance agents, and so you don't get much out of it. But it's good.
Good point.
The question you have to ask yourself is, who is my target audience? Who is it that I'm trying to reach that buys my product and service? Where do they gather? How can I get in front of them in those physical places or spaces or gathering places? And then beyond that, who are the influencers on my ideal client? I'll give you an example. I have a client that I'm working with. She built a life wellness studio, physical location. People come in and get certain treatments like red light therapy and cold plunge. Well, she's got the direct consumer, right, that comes in, and she knows who that demographic is. But also a big source for her is referrers, massage therapists, chiropractors, other practitioners that would refer clients to her. So she needs to get out there and work that network of people. And so that's part of getting out in the community is I may have to go visit them individually at their places of business, or I get in front of where they gather. And so those are my philosophies on what's most effective from a networking perspective.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and I'll build upon what Henry said. I think that you need to be very intentional about the idea of networking and having connections, and not just making the connections, but nurturing them and keeping in touch with people. Whether you are talking about a local business and local, people in the area that you want to be connected to. I think what Henry mentioned there about people who have an influence over your potential customers is really important. Centers of influence is what I call them. I actually keep a list in my workflow management software of people that I think it's important for me to have a relationship with. And one of the things I look for when I reach out and meet someone to add them to my network is I kind of ask myself, like, do I think that this is the kind of person who could be a friend of mine? Because I'll tell you, it's a heck of a lot easier to keep in touch with one of your friends than it is with somebody that you don't think is your friend, but you're trying to have FaceTime and conversations or send emails with because you feel some obligation to have some kind of connection to the person. Whether in the long term your business is successful or not, because if you ever run into trouble in your business and you ever have a bad time, that's when you need friends. And you need to be able to reach out and talk to people and ask for help, ask for advice, ask for ideas, and or even if things don't work out and you're looking at the next thing, friends again are going to be what helps you. So I think networking and communications and keeping track, just so that you don't forget somebody and you have meaningful outreach and conversations with people on a regular basis.
But I think you also need a good team around you. So looking at, some people have a business coach. Some people might be part of a mastermind. You've got your accountant. You've got an attorney. The funny thing, though, about a lot of these is most of them may not understand your business, and most of them may not understand how money flows in the business. You know, I always make the joke with attorneys, they went to law school because there's no math class. So don't ask for math advice,
I love that. And it took me years to find my financial advisor referred me to my attorney who referred me to my CPA. A lot of these decisions, you have to look at all angles.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How of Business podcast. This is Henry Lopez, and this was part 2 of a 3-part roundtable series on finding, growing, and exiting your small business. I release new episodes every Monday morning, and you can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the How of Business YouTube channel and my website, thehowofbusiness.com.
Thank you for listening to The How of Business. For more information about our coaching programs, online courses, show notes pages, links, and other resources, please visit thehowofbusiness.com.